Okay. Good day, folks, and welcome to another thrilling and exhilarating episode of the Inside Circle podcast. Today, I have Mr. Antong Lucky with me. Antong Lucky is the epitome of redemption and transformation. Antong is the author of A Redemptive Path Forward, From Incarceration to a Life of Activism. He is a man who in 1997 began the work of self-transformation. Antong is the father of three, two biological children, Tylea and Amir, and one child he raised her entire life, Deandrea. Antong is a passionate individual who cares deeply about people. He has spent the last 22 years working to improve people He has spent the last 22 years working to improve people, and that is what ultimately improves communities. Antong Lucky is a sought-out speaker and author on the subjects of redemption and transformation, Black men and boys healing, criminal justice reform, and police reform. Also, building communities, and that is just to name a few. Welcome, Antong. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here today, brother. How you doing?
Man, I'm feeling good this day, man. I woke up just in the presence, man, and grateful, man. I'm just grateful. It's always a day of gratitude.
Yeah. You kick it off with being grateful and gratitude. I ain't gonna pretend like I don't know because I'm familiar with you. Gratitude has not always been a part of your schematic. So where does that gratitude come from before we get into what it looked like before that?
Man, it comes from that awareness and knowing, man, that there are someone out there that's in a worse situation than I am. There's someone that's maybe incarcerated or maybe on some wing of a hospital with only moments to live. And going through some stuff, right? And I myself being able to come in the office today, drink me a good cup of coffee and talk to a good friend on this podcast, I'm thankful for that, thankful for the ability to be able to do that. So when I think about myself, brother, Elder, man, I think about all of the other people who may not be fortunate enough to be in this position, be right here or have life limbs and they sound mind. So I'm thankful of just being able to move about freely. So I'm thankful that I have a bunch of gratitude for that.
Okay. And so that for me is sort of the end of the story. Let's go back to the beginning of the story. How did you get to this place? Tell the folks a little bit about Antong and your history.
Okay, man, I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, born and raised, born in East Dallas, South Dallas on the map, but East Dallas to the locals. Born in Fraser Court Projects, man, in the early mid 70s, to a young mother and a father who thought they can escape the pressures of poverty, right? In those times, right? And at 9 months old, my father was sentenced to 50 years in prison. And my mother, a single mother, 16 years old, went to work, right? And she closed that chapter. So from a kid growing up, one told me anything about my father, right? And my mother, as I said, closed that chapter and just continued to work. And so as a kid, I wanted to know about my father, right? And so nobody told me, and I felt dumb to even ask the question. And so what I did was I put all of my interest and time and talent into school, right? I became a straight A student. I was a talented and gifted student. My mother worked long hours, so my grandparents became my primary caretakers. They were the ones who, when I would come in the house with that straight A report card, man, they would love me, man. They would love me and praise me and tell me how great I was. They was giving me all the stuff that I wasn't getting as a result of my father not being there and as a result of my mother working long hours as she did, right? And so I enjoyed that praise. I enjoyed my grandparents telling me that, right? But no amount of praise that they gave me was a match for the environment in which I grew up in. I grew up in East Dallas, and East Dallas back then was a very tough place because there were no positive role models or positive men who would take interest in making sure that the young kids of that community, excel. So what was guys who was in the drug game, who was gangsters, who was pimps, that's when we came outside, that's all you saw. And the name of the game in my neighborhood, Brother Ezra, was survival. Like you had to survive. And it was an unsaid rule that smart kids got bullied, And so I picked that up at an early age, man. And I began to amputate my personality. I was a good kid. I was my grandparents' favorite. Yeah, they loved me. I knew I was their favorite because they allowed me to sleep in the bed with them. When all my other cousins slept in the back room. That's how I knew I was a favorite. And so, and I had that family type of environment that made up for what I lacked from my father not being there. But that neighborhood was tough, man. And so it was super tough. You come outside, man, you had to fight. It was all of that, right? And as a kid, I didn't understand that. And so all the neighborhoods around my neighborhood were neighborhoods that had identified with the Crip gang, right? That had migrated into Dallas at that particular time, early 80s. And so, but my neighborhood didn't have no identity. We were probably slow to the gang idea, right? But we would fight these other kids, like I went from a straight A student who loved school to amputate my personality and really becoming what the environment said I had to become in order to survive. Survival was the name. And so I never forget, like going to school or just going down the block, we would have to fight kids just for no reason, just because we were from a certain neighborhood and we didn't have a gang affiliation, right? And so then my grades started to decline. I started to get in trouble. But all the time that I was getting in trouble, I didn't lose myself, man. Everything that my grandparents had poured into me is stuck, right? So although I was becoming what the neighborhood wanted me to be, I always had myself, my spirit, all that stuff was still strong. I was a good person. I was just a naturally good kid. I didn't, like a lot of my friends, right? They but for me, right? And into ultimate, and I'm giving you the ultimate. There was an attempt made on my life, and
okay, go back to a lot of my friends, where you started with a lot of my friends, because it broke up.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Man, my internet unstable, but a lot of my friends, right? They had empathy, right? They didn't care. I noticed when I was young, I always cared about people, and I didn't lose part of me that cared about people. I just cared about people. In 7th grade, because of my neighborhood and our position in the community, a young brother made an attempt to shoot me at school, right? And the other was part of the gang, he was a Crip gang.
Okay, hold up, because we missing some good shit. It's breaking in and out again. I heard the piece about 7th grade, and then it was in and out, so they're gonna be missing some good stuff.
Yeah, that didn't.
Okay, yeah, that's much better. So you were at a lot of your friends. This is before 7th grade, right before the shooting.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of my friends, they had lost their emotion, I mean, they empathy, bro. And for me,
I can remember as far as back as fifth or sixth grade, me not, or even having a conversation with myself about not allowing myself to be like how they were as it relates to people, because they were, it was no emotions. It was whatever the neighborhood dictated, we with it 100%. And I understood it to a certain degree, but for me, everything that my grandparents had told me was ringing in the back of my head, even as I did all of the stuff that was mischievous. And so up until seventh grade, when it was a brother out of another neighborhood, young brother, made an attempt on my life, tried to shoot me in the seventh grade. It was the combination of that incident, along with a couple of more incidents, and I remember when Colors came out, the movie Colors, right? And Colors, for me, in my neighborhood back then, mind you, I said our neighborhood didn't have an identity, but all of the kids that was around in other neighborhoods had identified with Crips. There was no Bloods in Dallas whatsoever. I never heard of any Bloods in Dallas. So when that movie Colors came out around the same time, it gave us a express glimpse into life, gang life in California, right? Mm-hmm. I remember watching that movie, just blown away by that the culture, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. So I'm seeing, these brothers in blue rags, red rags, and I'm knowing this version of this is in Dallas, right?
Yeah.
The version is in Dallas. And so quite naturally, right, we said to ourselves, well, hey, if all these dudes we've been fighting all our lives wear blue, I guess we must wear red, right? And so we, when that movie came out, man, these cousins and friends said that we were gonna be the Bloods. And it just happened like that, brother. We just said, we're gonna be the Bloods and we're gonna be the most feared gang in the city. And that was at a time, it was no such thing as Bloods in Dallas, right?
Yeah.
No such thing. And so I remember going with my cousins to the bazaars and buying up all of the red bandanas they had, all of the red hats they had, the red Chuck Taylors they had, all of the Dickies, man, and we emulated what we saw on that TV. We emulated that, man. We took it and we emulated that. And so from that period around 1993 to 1995 was on fire as the gang explosion in Dallas, Texas, particularly, where it was the most violent, deadliest years in our history, right? And those choices led me in 1997. My daughter was born May 5th, 1997. May 21st, I was standing in front of a judge who said that I was a menace to society, and he sentenced me to the Texas Department of Criminal Corrections. And I never forget that day, because as I was standing there in front of the judge, when he said that, in the back of my mind, I was saying, well, I was having a conversation in my mind, and the conversation was, hold up, Your Honor, you don't understand. Like, I'm from East Dallas, man. Tough in East Dallas, man. I really had to do this stuff to survive. I'm really a good kid, man. I ain't really who I am. I just put that on to protect me, and I was having this conversation, right? And it never came out of my mouth. It was just all in my head. It was like everything like in slow motion, frozen. And I remember standing there, right, saying to myself, because I had been thinking about this, that I didn't want to be to my daughter, who was just born 2 weeks prior, what my father was to me. I didn't want her to feel what I felt as a kid. by my father being in prison, and now her father is in prison. And I remember walking to the back with that bailiff, feeling like I failed in my duties as a man and my duty as a father in life. I remember feeling like I failed the test as they would lead me back. But that day for me became very pivotal because the question that was in my mind as I had been sentenced that I wanted answered was, how did I go from straight A student, a good kid who loved the appreciation and love of my grandparents and the acknowledgement that they gave me, to this white man calling me a menace to society? I wanted to know how that happened. Yeah. I went into prison saying, man, how did this happen? Like that question from the county jail was the most prominent question in my head more than anything. Like, how did this happen to me? Like, how did my life skid out of control to joining the gang, to selling drugs, to now being considered a menace to society and then sentenced to prison? I wanted to know the answer to that, right? So I went into prison with that at the top of my mind, right? Playing my life. Tupac had a song out, right? I gotta mention this. Tupac had a song out that he had just released called Live and Die in LA right before I went to prison, right? And I remember listening to that song, right? And I remember right before prison, I was listening to that song. And that song shook some stuff up in me, even before prison, right? While I was out on bond, listening to Tupac, because Tupac kind of spoke for us back then, at least for me. And I remember the line that he said that pierced my soul, man. It pierced me so hard, man. It pierced me, but it pierced me in a good way because it was simultaneously rolling with me as I was going through this process, right? Because music influence, right? And Tupac said, and Live and Die in LA, he said, learn about the West Coast, B's and C's, the mother dudes, copycat. D's the G's. When he said that, wow. When he said that, bro, I wasn't no more good. I wasn't no more good because in my mind I said, we started this gang stuff emulating what they were doing in California. Like the gang culture and lifestyle one unique to Texas, that wasn't our culture. That we emulated, like we duplicated what we saw on the TV or what we heard on the radio, right? But that wasn't our culture. That we didn't grow up in the gang life, as I alluded to earlier, right? Yeah. And so I had to be real with myself because one of the things I was doing, I was going to prison and I started this whole idea of just self-introspection. I wanted to be real with myself. When I was going into prison and I was asking that question, like, how did this happen? What I said to myself that whatever I found, I was going to accept it and deal with it. That I was going to face whatever it was, and I had to deal with it head on, right? And Tupac saying that, and me knowing that the gang lifestyle wasn't unique to Texas, that we duplicate. I remember watching Colors saying, man, we're going to be like that. That's what we finna do. I remember that, bro. I remember that. And so if I'm being real to myself, and I know a lot of brothers, especially in Texas, they don't like when I say this, man, but we would duplicate and emulate what we saw brothers in California doing. They hate when I say that, but that's the truth. Because I can remember when it wasn't no such thing as gangs in Dallas, particularly, right? Texas. And so we emulated that. And that's a hard something to deal with, right? Because especially when you build your whole identity around it. And then if you're being truthful to yourself and you say, I gotta acknowledge. That was a tough thing for me, bro, but I had to acknowledge that. And I had to acknowledge that. Tupac sparked that idea, but I had to acknowledge that we emulated what we saw. And so I went into prison. Needless to say, I went into prison. This was my thought my mindset, my daughter. That was my mindset going into prison.
Yeah, that is that's heavy, and I run across that a lot, traveling the country, where that particular brand of gang culture and ideology, has transplanted and taken roots in other regions. And it's sad that, the West Coast, California, is responsible for so much genocide, exporting so much genocide.
Right.
It's a sad thing, man. It's a sad thing. So when you found yourself in prison, what changed?
Man, I was pondering that, right, as I went into prison. And I was really locked on that. I mean, I was seriously pondering that, because I seriously and wholeheartedly felt like I had flunked the test of life by being in prison. I feel like I had flunked, and I was doing a disservice to my daughter, my duties as a father. And then I kept just reflecting back to how I felt as a kid with my father being in prison, man. That really shook me, man, because I felt like I didn't have no place, like I didn't have no foundation. I didn't have nobody to tell me or to pour into me, the things that I needed to know. I had to learn all that stuff on the fly, man. And I remember how dumb I felt wanting to ask people about my father, something that I should already know. You know what I'm saying? And my mother, and I love her to death, my mother closed that chapter and she never looked back. When he went to prison, that was it. He didn't exist no more. And so and then a young parent, she didn't think that it was important to talk to me about that, right? That she didn't think like that, to think that was important. She just closed that chapter, moved on, man. And I remember going to PTA meetings where I seen kids with their fathers. Oh, I remember having friends with their fathers present, even the blended families, but their fathers were present. And I didn't have that feeling. I was jealous because I didn't have that feeling. And I remember feeling like, why I'm feeling like this? Why me? With God, what did I do to deserve this, right? And so I thought about all that as I'm going into prison, that I'm repeating this cycle that ultimately my daughter is going to be thinking the same way, right?
So now let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So going to the PTA meetings and going to these different functions and seeing these fathers present in these young folks' lives, and that feeling of jealousy coming up for you. Mm-hmm. At that age, and what age can you remember and identify feeling those?
This like third to like fifth or sixth grade, that area.
Third to sixth grade.
Like so third grade, like, young kids. I was young.
So how were you processing those feelings of jealousy? What were you doing with those feelings of jealousy?
Man, I didn't never play it out towards any other kids. Mm-hmm. It was just something that it was something that I felt and that I kept in my head, that I buried in my head. Like, you would have never known that I was having these thoughts, that I was even thinking about the kids, or the kids never knew that I was thinking about, damn, you got your father there. Cause I wouldn't talk about it. I was too embarrassed to even talk about this stuff. Any conversation that led to my family in terms of mom and dad, man, I ran from those conversations, man. I never dealt with those. I just buried them, or I ran. I ran like a deer. So no one never knew that I was thinking like that. It's just that was in my head. That what I buried in my subconscious. But I ran at every opportunity. When somebody would ask me about my dad, man, I would create some kind of diversion tactic and get the hell away. You feel me?
So that's how you dealt with it.
Yeah, that's how I dealt with it. Yeah. I would get away.
Avoidance, diversion, and defensive tactics.
Man, I did that every time, bro. I mean, I remember as a kid, man, I did that so much, man. I did that a lot, bro. Just running and avoiding and that holds, because I was so embarrassed of that, right? And so now I'm in prison and I'm thinking about my daughter and I'm saying, damn, she gonna go through some of that same stuff, right? And so for me, my main focus when I went into prison was that I'm finna deal with me. One, I got to deal with me. I got to figure out like how much did I play into me being in this predicament. I wanted to own that shit. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to own how much did I play. Like I didn't want to sugarcoat. I didn't want to navigate. I wanted to deal with it head up, man. I wanted to get, so I got in that stainless steel mirror, man. I looked in that mirror and I said, man, whatever I found with me, I'm gonna deal with that first. And then two, I said, I wanted to get back out as quick as I can to my daughter, to try to make up for the time that I've been gone and try to catch in, et cetera, et cetera. So those are my two things, right? And so I go into prison, and at the time, you know, the numbers have exponentially jumped, right? I mean, it was one point in time, no such thing. You know, you go to Texas youth prison, juvenile, man, you'd never see no blood without crip. Now the numbers have jumped. You know, when we started this, it just boom, it blew up, right? And I had that one experience, man. And I didn't. And for us, man, we were just doing and being who we were, but I didn't know even back then how much of an impact that decision we made were, right? Until I had two friends. This before prison, 1994. I had two friends who were from another neighborhood who emulated us, right? And put their neighborhood down. But I had two little young brothers, man, who were, man, they were gang members in every sense of the word. Man, they took this stuff to the heart, right? And they was wrecking hell on the city, right? And these little brothers looked up to us, right? To me and my cousins. And they both got killed, right? They both got killed together, right? Double. And so their family had a double funeral, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember me and my cousin and my partner, my friend, childhood friend, we were considered in Dallas as it relates to Bloods, like the founders, right? That's what they gave us, right? And so we were getting ready to go to this funeral. I'll never forget this, man. It was a double funeral. And we were getting ready to go to the funeral. Brother, we had on red Dickie shirts, black Dickie pants, red Chuck Taylors. We had flags everywhere, right? And I remember feeling, I'm telling you what I felt, man. I remember feeling like, I don't think this is right. I don't think we should go into this funeral like this and disrespect this mother, you know, blah, blah, even though they were gang members, but we gang members, but it didn't feel right. You know what I'm saying? It didn't feel right walking, because you know, back then, funerals, everybody dressed up here, so it didn't change now, but you know, you suited and booted, right? Paying your respects. And here we is, man, we look like we out of Inglewood. You feel me?
Wearing the street uniform.
Yeah, wearing the street uniform. And man, but I'm saying that to say how I was thinking back then, what I was remembering, you know, just the stuff that I felt, that I made a mental note of. And I felt like funny going to this funeral like this. So, and I remember when we got there, and we were having conversations about how we look, like, is it appropriate, all that, right? And so, and I remember opening the door, when we opened the door in that chapel, man, it had to be like 500 or 600 people in there, man, and they was all in gang paraphernalia, everybody. They had my two little friends buried. They had on red shirt, white Dickies, red rags, and they casket. Everybody was gang related paraphernalia except their mamas. But everybody else, and I was like, wow, you know what I'm saying? And then I remember, because I seen gang members, it was the first time I seen gang members who were white, who were Mexican, who were, you know, different persuasions, and they had come far and wide, you know, They had come far and wide, right? And then at the cemetery, right, all of these Bloods, they were female, they were Mexican. I mean, people we had never seen, but they came from everywhere, all parts of Texas, man. And they were paying homage to me, my cousin, and my friend. They were like, "Oh, gee, what we doing?" You know. And so that was the first time that I realized the impact, right? Because they were, you know. And so when I fast forward, when I get to prison, and I'm having this epiphany, I'm working on myself. My first couple of months in prison, I met this brother coming out when I was coming out to Chow Hall. And this brother walked up on me. He had been locked up like probably 10, maybe 15 years. He was an older brother. And he saw me come out the chow hall. And as I was coming out the chow hall, he ran up on me. And this brother words to me was this right here. He said, and mind you, I'm going through this transformation in my mind. Because at this point I hadn't joined, I hadn't got active, I hadn't did anything. I'm staying to myself, working on me. And this brother said, he said, little brother, he said, man, you such and such, right? And I said, yeah. He said, man, all these brothers in this prison, man, is talking about you. They paying homage to you. These brothers are falling out of place. They do whatever you ask them to do. They idolizing you. This was his brother said to me. I'm talking about on the back, it's 110 degrees. We are walking through on the golden ladder, right? And this brother said, little brother, if you have the ability to lead these brothers to do wrong, I want you to know within you is that same ability to lead them to do right. You're a leader. And I had never heard that before, right? In the manner that he said it.
Yeah.
He said, brother, you got the ability to lead these brothers to do right. You know, that the stuff that they doing is wrong. He started, and he didn't know what I was dealing with and what I was going through in my mind, right? And I hadn't even paid attention to how brothers were treating me. You know, I hadn't even I was just being me, but I had never paid attention to what he had just pulled my coattail on, right? I never, and then I was wondering, like, how the hell he paid attention? Where he see this at? Am I slipping? You know, why I didn't know this? Why I didn't know he was paying attention to me? And I remember, man, him pouring into me saying, little brother, lead these brothers to do right. They lost, lead them to do right. And he began to give me books to read. He was me, man. He began to mentor me. And man, the rest was history, brother. I mean, the rest was history. I began to really, really dig in myself. I'm talking about, and being totally vulnerable at a time. I denounced my gang in prison. Because all the gang, all the Bloods, they wanted me to call the shots. I denounced that in prison because I had made up in my mind that if I would go all in, at least go all in to do wrong, then I owe going all in to do right, right? And so I denounced the gang. I started reading. Me and the library became friends. I just started reading everything I could get my hand on, but I realized how much I had started realizing connections. I started realizing correlations of half the brothers that I was talking to that dropped out of school. So I realized the correlation with that. And I've seen that a lot of brothers wasn't willing to be accountable to their stuff, you know, and that this whole idea of being masculine and macho and not having feelings, we had been tricked by that, right? And so what I started finding out was, and I was being like a sacrificial lamb, was I was finding that the true courage and the true strength was in my ability to be vulnerable, my vulnerability, being able to look in the mirror and deal with my weakness and flaws and then share that with other brothers, right? They looking at me like, damn, this brother, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I started speaking in prison, right? And before you know it, Brother Elder, you know, it was, and I was young, man. I was like, I'm talking about the ages of like 20 to 24. And I was young, man. And when I think back on it, and these brothers, whenever I would speak, because I started speaking, we had this circle of kings, I started speaking. And it was mostly about everything that I spoke on was us dealing with our own cognitive distortions, right? You know, the stuff that most people wouldn't talk about. But what I noticed though, in hindsight, was that every time I would speak, or that they heard that I would speak, most of these brothers, I'm talking about killers, when they heard I would speak, the rank would have to come out because everybody would fall off the wings to come hear me, right? Everybody, I'm just doing me and sharing my truth, but I wasn't paying attention to a lot of the cues like I probably should have back then, because I was coming into this knowledge of self and dealing with myself and using myself as an example, that I wasn't paying attention to the impact that it was having on the brothers, right?
Yeah.
You know how it is when brothers, man, they curious, but they ego and everything's in a way, but they asking questions and they coming around. And so before long, right, I had all these brothers and they was Crips, they were Mexican Mafia, they were Aryan. They would just gravitate to me, right? Because I was really emptying myself when I really look at it. And I wasn't like what they had experienced, right? In terms of people who've changed or purportedly say they changed, or the people that was in the prayer circle. It was different. It was something different, that it brought people together, right? I was fortunate enough to have money on my books, and so I would always spread and feed everybody. And I remember brothers, because in prison, if you ain't a part of this, you don't get none of this. Because it was my money, and I was dealing with myself, and I was shedding all of the layers that I had put on. I was breaking a whole bunch of prison norms, man.
Yeah.
I was breaking prison norms, man, and I was doing it woefully ignorant, I guess. But I was breaking norms because I would, we would spread, and I would go around the dorm and feed everybody. I don't care who you were. You look like you hungry, I'm gonna feed you, right? And I was doing that, and them brothers didn't understand it. Like they said, "Look, what you doing?" But it was just me reconnecting back to where I was before my amputated personality happened, right? And so I would give people food, and man, I began to start making a lot of friends and talking to different people. And these people just happened to be in gangs or cliques or such, but I was talking to the humanity in them. I was talking to the person in them, because me shedding my stuff allowed me to do that. I didn't have nothing that was preventing me or that was blocking me from connecting with another brother, because I seen them as my brother, whether they was white, green, black, or whatever. I seen them as a human being. And so,
Yes,
they
sir.
tattoos and none of that stuff stopped me. And so I guess I was ignorant to a degree, but I was connecting with people just based off that, right? And some of the stuff that I learned, right, in doing that, like I remember I talk about this guy that was a part of the Aryan Nation that I became real good friends with, right? And I met him doing what like I said, feeding. That one, and it wasn't no method to that. That one, I didn't come up with that idea. It was just me doing, my heart. It wasn't no method. And so these conversations would happen organic. And I'll never forget this guy that I was talking to, Aaron. He was leader of a high-ranking member of the Aryan Nation. And this white brother, I gave him food, because ain't nobody gonna turn down no spread. I don't care who you is, how mad you is. If you eat off that commissary, you ain't turning down no spread. And so but I would have these conversations, man, and I remember talking to this brother, right? This white brother. And this brother had tattoos, man, from the top. He was bald head. He had tattoos from the top of his head, man. I'm talking about to the bottom of his feet, man. I'm talking about he had all in his face, lightning bolts, swastikas. He even had he had a tattoo of a man hanging from a tree on his arm. I'm assuming that probably was a black person. But this dude had tattoos everywhere, right? But me and him used to sit in the corner and talk, right? And I remember the brothers, man, on my periphery, they used to be watching. They had a lot of questions, because I wasn't supposed to do that, right? And me and this brother were talking. We used to talk all the time in the day room. And I started realizing instantly that we had a lot of stuff in common, right?
Yeah.
He cared about his family. He had kids he was trying to get to. But on the surface, looking at him with them tattoos, you can have a connotation that he grimace, that he don't care, that he a savage, right? Just based on the tattoos. And so when I started talking to him and finally coming out of it, I realized something, right? I realized that those tattoos weren't an indication that he was a bad person or grimace or savage, as most people would think, just looking at it from the outside. But instead, those tattoos were layers that he used to scare people off,
Mm-hmm.
to scare people away from that hurt little boy, that scary little boy that's in him before he amputated his personality. See, in that moment, I connected with him in the same way that I put on these layers, and one of those layers called blood, gang, this or that, to protect the little boy that's in me that I kept telling you about, that kept wrestling with what grandmama and them told me, et cetera, and all the good that I know I was. I had to put on these layers to survive and to fit in. I was able to see that same thing with that Aryan brother.
Mm-hmm.
I seen that deep down inside of him was a afraid little boy who had to amputate his personality and had to go to the drastic measures of putting tattoos all in his face to scare people off. You feel me? I saw that, bro. And when I seen it, I began to see that in every man that I talked to. You know, I started to see that, though I started to see past the layers, you know. And it was something that most men didn't talk about. Most men, because we taught to be this machismo, and we gotta be tough, and we can't never cry, and we gotta be this way. But deep down inside, that little boy want to get out of there. Yeah. Deep down inside, that little boy, that the original self, the original personality won't come out. But it needs a safe way to do that, right? And so I started seeing that, right? And all of the brothers that I talked to, man, and these brothers started seeking me out. And I saw on a micro level that if we created that space, that if we start talking about vulnerability being strength versus weakness, et cetera, that we can get a lot of men to unlayer and come out of that, out of all them layers that they've layered themselves. And until we begin to address that and provide that kind of space, we'll continue to see what we see as it relates to society. We'll continue to abandon our families. We'll continue to make bad choices. We'll continue to be commissary for the prison. You know, we'll continue to be that. We'll continue to be bad to our families until we allow a space for us to deal with the real. Because I think deep down inside, what I learned in prison was all of those men. You had some men who would run from any indication of dealing with their real true self, because there's some stuff some men just couldn't handle what was underneath the gunk, right? But I seen an overwhelming majority of men who really were looking for a way to come out of that, man. And so on a micro level, I had brothers who were Bloods and Crips sitting at the same table. We were talking about for a lot. I mean, it was relationships that happened that would have never happened, you know, had it not been a cat. I seen brothers who were Bloods and Crips through this connection that would have each other back like they've been knowing each other all their life, right? Once you broke all that stuff. And I started seeing it. And that is what made me say that I wanted to do this kind of work, right? And then at the time I was doing that work, and I'm gonna be quiet, but at the time I was doing that work, the whole time I've been in prison, when the news came on, the day room was chaos. Nobody cared and concerned about the news. I remember making a mental note that, like, man, why these dudes don't pay attention to what's going on in the free world? But when the stories came on, like One Life to Live General Hospital, these dudes would be glued to the TV, and if you came there and made a sound, they'll beat you to the ground. And I remember saying, man, this is crazy. Man, how can you spend so much idle time not building and not dealing with? I used to tell the brother, you so busy wanting to get outside and not dealing with what got you in here that you're gonna come right back. And so I never understood that, right? And on this particular day, I remember like yesterday, I had began the work of bringing brothers together. We had a cohesive unit of brothers from different backgrounds and all that good stuff. And the news came on, and on the screen was this brother talking. And I remember hearing the sound. I remember hearing his voice and his cadence saying to myself, that's that sound. The same sound that I was working on, the frequency that I was working on in prison. And when I looked up, this brother was in my neighborhood, which was another indicator. He was in my neighborhood talking about gang intervention and prevention. And then in the next screen, which was another indication, he had two of my cousins who started the gang with me on TV with him. And I said to myself, man, if this brother got them two on TV, he gotta be the truth. This brother would never come on TV with much stuff they done, right? And this brother was talking about gang intervention and working with gangs, this. And I glued, and what I noticed, the day room was quiet. That's what I noticed too. Day room ain't never been quiet. That's how I knew God was working. God was in it. And so that night I wrote a letter to that brother. His brother's name was Omar Jawar. I wrote a letter to my cousin and said, whoever that brother you with, connect me to him. He's saying some stuff. And I didn't know that they was telling him at the time that if you're gonna do something in this neighborhood, do anything in this neighborhood, you need to get with our cousin. He's just in prison. And as fate had it, 6 months later, I was released. Didn't even know it. I got released. And I met that brother, Omar Jawar. And when we met, that brother was telling me about using OGs to work with the BGs to get them out of gangs. And this brother was using the exact same terminology that I had been using. I knew God was in this. And I handed him something that I wrote in prison. And he read it. And I remember him reading, and he looked at me and he said, wow, because it was the exact same words that he used.
Yeah.
And man, we looked at each other, man, and we said, let's go. And man, we started this work. It was an organization called Vision Regeneration. He had started. We had started this work. We did the first gang peace treaty in Dallas, where we had 470, I think, Bloods and Crips come together. It was some work to get it done, but they came together and signed a peace treaty, right? And that became the symbol of the work. So we began that work of using OGs, using those in neighborhoods who had influence to work with young people to change their trajectory. Because Omar always said, if I can get you to understand that if you change your character, then your characteristics have a market advantage in this economy. And he believed that. We both believe that. So for the last 22 years, we have been working inside communities, showing brothers that if they use their influence for good, that they can change the trajectory of our community. So our focus has been in every aspect of how do we get men, how do we get these brothers who society has marginalized or even written off to understand that they have value, that their value is in their story, that their story can then be a sign for some young person to say, because he understands what's down this road, he can show me how to navigate the system. So we spent the last 22 years doing just that. Our organization is Urban Specialists, and we work with over 30,000 individuals since we started, getting them and putting them in positions to be the leaders within their own communities. And so that's the work that I do, that I love doing every day. Just trying to be an example and help somebody, bro. That's the work.
That is the work.
Yeah.
That is the work. And folks, I don't know if you caught that piece. He said urban specialists down there in Dallas. And they've been doing this work for over 22 years now. And Inside Circle, you know, myself, Aaron, Rick, James, we've had the opportunity to meet these brothers and sit with these brothers in circles, both in New Jersey and in Dallas. And we're looking forward to doing more work with these cats here in California, down in Dallas, and across the country, and bringing this work and this healing to all of these young folks to hopefully help put them in position where they recognize their value, where they can get in touch with their little boy, just like Antong got in touch with his little boy and connected with his Aryan brother and his little boy inside of prison. We're trying to do this all across the country, man. We're gonna make it happen.
Man, and I'd be remiss to say, Brother Eldred, man, the Inside Circle, man, and y'all whole crew is the unadulterated truth, man. You know what I'm saying? I remember me and you, brother. I remember meeting Dr. James Clear at first, and me and Omar, because we have been doing this work so long, man. We have dealt with every aspect of this work, and also as a result, all the characters of this work. You know, everybody You know, everybody say they do this work, but don't really do this work. You know, ain't did no work on themselves. And so I remember years ago, me and Omar went to California to meet Dr. James and Brother Baraji. And I remember the conversation that we had, and a moment of silence just for Bishop Omar Jawar, who passed away last year from COVID complication. COVID, my big brother, mentor, spiritual guide, everything. He was the absolute truth. Shout out to him. You know, may God continue to, you know, keep him covered. But I remember us going, and me and Omar had this conversation, and we were saying, man, I sure hope these brothers are real, man, because we had a mutual friend that was bringing us, right? And we said, man, we hope that these are some real brothers, and these brothers not faking and shaking, and got our friend, you know, in the mix master, right? And Elder, I get up there and we do a session. We do a session with Dr. James and Brother Baraji, right? And some more people. Did a small circle. And I can't say what happened in that circle because I told them it's confidential. Y'all ain't gonna talk about this. We're gonna keep this in the circle. Because some things happened in that circle that wasn't gonna happen.
Like it always does.
Hey, like that. Hey, and so, man, I remember this like yesterday. Me and Omar was on the airplane coming back from California. And we both said, man, them brothers is the absolute truth, man. We said, man, because it ain't too often that you find brothers as pure as you all are in this work. You know, you find your counterpart in this work who really does this work for real, who really done the work on themselves and really have a passion for people and really trying to unlock stuff in people for real now. Because most people look for problems that are fundable as opposed to problems that are solvable. We look for stuff that we can solve. And so when we met Doc, man, we left saying, man, he the truth. And then we was fortunate enough to meet you. We watched the documentary, man. I seen you on the documentary. I seen the other brothers, Rick and Aaron, man, on that documentary. And I said, just from afar, right? I said, man, them brothers, the truth, man. I said, man, them brothers, the truth. And then we had the opportunity to do a circle with y'all, and we locked in. We brothers forever, man. You know, it just
Forever.
It feels so good, man, knowing, you know, knowing somebody who is for real in this work and for real doing this work, man. And that I stand on. That's what y'all do, man. You brothers came to Dallas, man, and the brothers ain't fell off yet from the magic, I call it magic, that happened when they was introduced to the circle. And all of y'all, man. So I just want to say thank you, brother, for doing the work and continuing doing the work and continue being a vessel to unlock and uncover and unlayer all the layers that's been placed on the men and also women in society, bro, because that is the most important work to be done, at least from my perspective. I'm biased. The work that Inside Circle does is the most important work in this space. And I've been doing this for a long time. So thank you, brother. Thank Aaron, Rick, everybody, bro. Y'all whole cast, man. Y'all got the Avengers, man. And I'm happy to be a part of the Avengers. Seriously.
Hey, man, without a doubt, man, we love you. We love the whole urban specialist community. We love Dallas. And we just going to keep doing this work. We're going to keep, letting our little boys run around and connect with the rest of the world, man. It's the work.
Man. Yes, indeed, man. Yes, indeed. I
Thank you for coming on today, man, and sharing some time with us and sharing your story and spreading the love, man. I look forward to more.
Man, I want more, and I just tell the listeners this before I close out, man, because I love you, man. Make sure y'all go to Amazon and pick up A Redemptive Path Forward from Incarceration to a Life of Activism. It chronicles the journey of Bishop Omar and I in this work. It's an extension to the work that the Inside Circle does, but it's the work. Go get that book, man. Go and leave a review, and then follow me on all social. Antong Speaks, ANTONG SPEAKS, and let's just stay connected. Thank you, brother, for having me.
Antong Speaks, and pick up the book. We're going to have it in the footnotes for folks. Go check it out and go check him out. You will not be disappointed.
Thank you, man. Yes.